All right. So good afternoon, everyone. My name is Behnaz Rohani, and I am EMATIC Professional Development Coordinator. I want to welcome each and every one of you to today's family. It's really a family, a faculty meetup. That's how it is to me. I'm the host of the meeting, and our moderators today are Angela Huddleston from Bluegrass Community and Technical College in Kentucky, and Jeff Eldridge from Edmonds College in Washington. Welcome and thank you for being here today with us. So floor is yours, Jeff and Angela.
Great. So Angela, did you want to say anything to start off, or should we go to the first topic here?
Just overall, we're going to try to split this up into 3 pieces, as you see on your screen. We thought we'd start off with kind of talking about identifying different sites and apps that students can use for possibly getting their work done for them. And then we're going to go on to, well, we know this happens, but how can we try to circumvent this? And if it does happen, how can we actually remove exam questions from tutoring sites on the web? So we figured we'd just start off with talking about different sites and tools that we know that students can use. So we're going to start off listing a couple, and then if you've got any to share, feel free to chime in, and we'll kind of start from there. So I'll turn it back over to Jeff.
Okay, so there's kind of 3 general categories, I think, of these sites. One, which the most famous of which perhaps is Photomath. It's an app that you download to your phone, but there's some other ones like Microsoft Math and Brainly that do some similar things. You can basically take a picture of a math problem and then it will solve that problem showing all the steps. So here's a question from a calculus assessment that I gave where they weren't supposed to get any outside help. I mean, it was an open book and everything, but they weren't supposed to use these other sites. And so if you take your phone and you have Photomath installed, you can see here, this is what my phone looks like when I go to take a picture of the problem. So you focus in on the problem and you press take a picture, and then Photomath will convert that image into a math problem here. You can see it's exactly the same thing. And then if you click show solving steps, it will show you these steps on how to solve the problem. Now for this particular problem, it turns out that it's just a geometric series and all you need to do is figure out the ratio in absolute values less than 1 and you're done. But what Photomath does, of course, is use the root test, and it actually gets it wrong because it says the absolute value is a negative number and writes it in this weird form. This doesn't always happen, but it happened to happen on this particular problem. And then, of course, I had a student submit this work, which was basically copied line by line from the Photomath work. And because it was so bizarre and wrong, I was able to identify that he and some of his colleagues had used this particular app to use this. So Photomath is free, but they try to upsell you to buying other things like additional steps or access to solutions to even numbered problems in textbooks and things, which a lot of the sites have. So that's the first category, is a sort of Photomath category. And then there's the sort of online type site. Symbolab is the one that my students tend to use, although for calculus problems, some of them like to use derivativecalculator.net or integralcalculator.com. Mathway is another one that's actually owned by Chegg now, but Symbolab seems to be pretty big, at least among my students. So, here's a problem, for example, where they're supposed to work out a basic integral. This is even before we've learned about antiderivatives, so they were supposed to just use geometry to do this. And here's what happens when you type this integral into Symbolab. It goes through all the steps for you and shows you all these things. Now, it will give you the answer in a few steps for free, but to show all these steps, you have to pay a monthly fee. And of course, the Symbolab solution here uses trig substitution, which we had not learned at all by this point in the class. And that might be one giveaway if your student uses this before they've learned that. My student just sort of copied down the exact format from Symbolab, but left out all the stuff that he didn't understand. And so, but you'll see students probably copying down a bunch of this stuff that they don't understand. And sometimes these will be the steps that you would expect them to use, and sometimes it'll be these bizarre things that you have no idea why. It's certainly not the best way to solve the problem. Wolfram Alpha would fit into this category too. It charges to show the steps, but I haven't had as many students using Wolfram Alpha because it costs more. And then the third category is probably the most insidious. That's Chegg, which is the big one, but there's some other ones that are trying to do the same thing Chegg is doing. And officially, Chegg is a textbook rental site, and they also sell answers to even-numbered problems from textbooks. But one of their big parts of their business is what they call tutoring, but it's really just people who, mostly in India, because that's where they have their tutoring center is based, solving problems that students upload and to Chegg, and their honor code says you're not supposed to use this for exams and to cheat and everything. But if you look at the math problems on Chegg, 95% of them are obviously done during an exam. This is one that a student of mine posted last summer, and he very helpfully to me, because it was easy to find all the posts he'd made, put this exact wording at the top of every single post he ever made. And this was on an assessment where he wasn't supposed to be getting any outside help. So a student, and this costs $15 a month. And you can post a certain number of questions a month. So some students have multiple accounts or pay extra to upload more questions. But then sometimes within an hour or two, often within an hour or two, sometimes even faster, somebody will post a solution. So here is the solution that the Chegg tutor posted for this problem. Here is the solution my student submitted, and you can see they're identical. This one I put up here because, as an example, because well, this student was rather prolific, but as far as cheating on Chegg, but he used the divergence theorem here, which we hadn't studied yet because he just copied it from this Chegg solution. And then the Chegg tutor was wrong because he used the divergence theorem on a surface that wasn't closed. So this is the wrong answer anyway. So, the Chegg tutors are not infallible. So those are sort of the three big, Chegg, Symbolab, and Photomath, and their brethren. Those are the three big categories here. So that was the first topic we wanted to open up the floor for, to see what questions people might have or experiences they had with these sites or similar ones. I'm not monitoring the chat here, so they're...
Yeah, I am moderating it, so don't worry.
And one thing I would like to add, a lot of Jeff's examples had to do with higher level courses. For your lower level courses, sometimes your students aren't as adept at looking at going into certain cheating sites or whatever, and they just use their Google or Bing or whatever their search engine is. I do want to point out that several of my students in college algebra and below, they end up just typing in a search engine, solve equations, and the first result is this website called mathpapa.com. You just type in any equation. It doesn't matter if it's rational, linear, logarithmic, exponential, doesn't matter. You just type in your equation and hit calculate it, and it shows them all the steps for free and the answers. So that's an easy one. They don't even have to go to any other site. Of course, that's more of an algorithmic cheating tool as opposed to giving it to somebody to solve for them. But even if you ask a student to show their steps on an exam, all they can do is just copy those down. They don't even have to know how to do those. And also, one thing I've noticed is some of my classes I teach with the virtual online classes, I use OneNote, and that has the Microsoft Solver in there. So you can type an equation or a function and highlight it, and it will ask you, do you want to graph this? Do you want to solve this? What do you want to do? And it'll do it for you. So there are some other things out there as well. So somebody mentioned in the chat Reddit. Yeah, so and then if you can just copy and paste your problem into a search engine, it'll solve it for you. It'll pull something up. Somebody mentioned OneNote as well, Brandon.
Yeah, these, I mean, the sites I've showed so far are ones that are, official websites out there and things, but students, of course, can use, discussion forums. They might not get an answer very quickly on Reddit or Stack Exchange or one of these things, but they can also collaborate with each other on Discord or by just text message or something like that. So, I mean, what we'll probably end up discussing here today is not every possible way they could cheat, but these are certainly some of the tools. And in the chat, somebody asked how easy it was to search for your problem online using Google. And I was going to mention a little bit about that later, but if you have a generic problem, especially one you've copied word for word out of your textbook or something, you're going to find lots of results. So what I tend to do anyway is to rephrase my questions a little bit, just because I'm particular about way things are phrased. And so when I found this particular problem by copying one of these sentences, putting it in quotes, and searching on Google, and it popped right up on Chegg. You can also search in Chegg, but their search engine isn't great. But one thing I found useful is that when you're writing these problems, if you're worried about students posting them online, is to, before you give the assessment, search the problems online, and then if you're finding a whole bunch of different variations on that, you might want to rephrase your problem slightly so that you're the only result or one of the few results, so that, or maybe that there's no result, so you can find it more easily after the fact.
Jeff, Scott Barnett, he said that he would be happy to share a couple of things that he's done to mitigate the effectiveness of cheating with Chegg. So he's saying that at any point that you think is appropriate, he would like to share his screen. So
okay, yeah, and we're going to get to some of those things. I have some of those things on a slide a little bit later on in our next section here. But after I do that, then it would be, it would be great if Scott could share anything that that we don't cover initially here. Any other questions or comments for this part? Okay, maybe we'll move on, and then we'll probably have time at the end for just to go back to some of these issues or talk about some more general stuff. So, how do you write questions that will, it's not going to be foolproof, but help prevent your students from using these tools? So here's an example of a problem. This is a L'Hopital's rule problem from first quarter calculus. You could just write out the the numerator and the denominator here, but if you write it this way, then you can't just take a picture with Photomath, at least yet, and have Photomath solve this problem, right? Maybe it'll get there soon. But this circumvents that. Now, some student could still write this out or type it into, write it out themselves and take the picture, or they could type it into Symbolab. This particular problem I really loved because when I stumbled across it when I was trying to come up, make some problems that would defeat Symbolab here, because if you type this into Symbolab, it will solve the problem for you, but instead of using L'Hopital's rule, which is the easy way to do the problem, it will factor out the numerator and the denominator here, and then do some algebra and cancel some things, and then plug in 0 and get the answer, which is correct, but there's no way a student could do this. Well, of course, I had a student or two on the test show this work, so I knew they'd use Symbolab. So this is another tip maybe in advance, is that, try your problems in some of these common tools, and if you get some problem like this where the method of solution that pops up is is maybe fine, but definitely not the easy way to solve the problem, that's maybe a good problem, because then the honest students will do it the right way and the dishonest students will use one of these things. So here's another example. This is a problem you might see in a textbook or something anyway, where it's a quotient rule problem in calculus, but instead of just writing out the f of x and g of x functions, so you could take a picture or type it into Symbolab, you're just given enough information here to solve the problem, and of course they have to understand the process of the quotient rule to do this. So that's another type of thing you could do. This doesn't help with Chegg though, because of course, any problem that your students should be able to solve, some Chegg tutor is going to be able to solve too. I put this up here. This is the same student I had who posted Chegg earlier, but this is from a year before when he was in my Calculus 2 class, and this is before the pandemic, and he actually took this picture during the exam in the classroom. And there's another, he did 3 problems, and there's one even with his hand in the picture. And I think I must have stepped out of the room for a minute to talk to a student who had an issue or something, and he snuck his phone out of his pocket and took these pictures and uploaded them to Chegg. Of course, I didn't discover this for a year, so I couldn't really do anything about it at the time. But this just goes to show that even after this pandemic situation is over and we're not teaching online, some of these issues might still be relevant here. So what can you do with Chegg? So some things I do before the assessment is, like I mentioned, phrase the problem in a unique way so that it will show up in a Google search, or so that it won't show up in a Google search for the students, but it'll show up after the fact if some student posted online. And search Google and Chegg for your problem wording so that you're fairly confident that your version is somewhat unique. And also, if you have the ability to do this, all my problems are in the LMS I use are randomized, and so I can make a lot of the constants and coefficients randomized in there, and that way it helps you identify which student posted the problem. Because if you're having them take a derivative of a polynomial, if you make the constant term some random number between 0 and 999, it's unlikely that more than one student is going to get that same constant. And so if some student has 837 as their constant, that was the student who posted the problem with 837 into the up to Chegg or one of these other sites. Then after the fact, you can do the Google search again, and if your problem shows up, then one of your students probably posted it there. One word of warning about Chegg is that they do some sort of database update around 4 a.m. Pacific time every day. So the problems might not show up in the Chegg search and then therefore the Google search until a day later or even more. And there have been cases where I've searched for problems and I thought I got them all off of Chegg, and then a few months later when I was going to use the problem again, here they show up somehow. So the Chegg search engine is not perfect, but it might help you that way. We'll talk in a little bit about how you can get Chegg without paying anything to take down the problems and give you a bunch of data about what the students, which students have posted them and so forth. But if you pay Chegg their monthly fee, you can view the solutions right after they're posted, which makes things a little bit faster. I feel really horrible paying Chegg any money, but I've done this and to help other faculty and stuff in my college locate things. And then I can show you how to do this if anybody wants to, but there's a way to figure out the Asker ID and the time that the solution was posted. So if you already know that student Joe Smith has a certain Chegg ID, then this Chegg ID comes up again, then it's probably the same student. So we could so these are some of the things that the ways I've dealt with Chegg, and we'll talk a little bit about the following up after the fact here in our next segment. So Angela, did you have anything to say at this time, or do we have other questions or comments?
Outside of dealing with the actual cheating tools, with writing your questions, again, the phrase problems in unique ways, even if you have certain courses where it's a little difficult you don't want to make the problem too hard for the student whenever they're going through the problems, but you can add maybe parts to where instead of just saying solve this equation and then type in your answers. So if you use something such as the different publisher content, such as like maybe Pearson, MyLabs, or something like that, you can create custom questions to add maybe parts or edit the question to add pieces in the middle. So it's sometimes it's kind of as like a red flag. The student can tell me the final answer, but they can't tell me any intermediate steps. That's a big flag that they got some sort of cheating tool to solve the equation instead of actually doing the intermediate parts. And but again, that kind of, you don't want to make it too much, whereas a guided question, but being able to phrase things and add different parts in sometimes helps. So students can't get an exact answer, whether they use Photomath or being able to type something into a web search. Does anybody have any thing that they use to, or ideas for how they write questions to maybe get around things?
I have one thing just to add real quick, and it's it looks like Jeff uses MyOpenMath or maybe Lumen or something like that. I write all my questions and do all my homework and tests and stuff in MyOpenMath, which means I write most of my questions. And for test questions especially, I will you can randomize a person's name in the question. So not only are like the coefficients and constants and such, are they randomized, but also there's like the name, and you can make even a simple algebraic problem have somebody's name in it. You know, Joe wants to find a product of this and this, you know, and so now it's just a simple multiplication problem, but there's still somebody's name in it that's randomized out of a database of hundreds or thousands of names. And so if you have, say, a name randomized and a bunch of coefficients and constants randomized, and that question gets posted, well, you can find exactly who did that. Yeah, this is a back-end solution for catching somebody, obviously, but that will allow you to at least identify dishonest students with a high degree of accuracy.
And I was reading the chat. I apologize that I wasn't laughing at you, Taylor. I was smiling. I was reading the chat. Robert Weston wrote, for word problems, including popular topics can help to disrupt search results. So he says, including the words never gonna give you up in a word problem is especially fun. Brandon Elms says that he likes concept questions instead of always focusing on the procedure or algebra questions. And that's good. So that way it's not just straight algebra or arithmetic. Anybody have any other ways that they kind of get around using the algorithmic solvers or different areas?
One idea that I have recently heard but have not had a chance to test out is that many of the testing question tools will allow an audio file for a question type or an answer, and having the student, asking the students to explain on audio verbally, what are the steps, how do you make sense of this? Getting the students' thoughts straight from their head into an audio answer, or at least for a few questions on an exam, sounds like an interesting way to really dig into the students' own understanding of the concept really is. So it's one thing I'm going to try out in the coming semester.
I know I've done some different parts with quizzes or exams where I've had a portion of the exam, like a part 1 and a part 2, sort of how they do in foreign language courses. So part of the exam is they have to meet with me virtually, or it's an online course. So we schedule a meeting with just us, and then they have to, I give them some problems and they work through them, and verbally, again, kind of an oral explanation, but they can they can do the visual. So hopefully kind of getting around possible ADA issues that Brandon mentioned, Brandon Elms mentioned in the chat, that sometimes you might run into some ADA compliance things with recording the audio files, depending on the accommodations people might have. But so sometimes you can have, so I've done part of the exam, part of the points is can you actually talk to the teacher and explain your problems? And then the other part is the actual written portion. So sometimes that kind of takes the pressure off some students, because they feel like some of them feel better that they can actually explain things and walk through it than doing all the writing. And then of course, those are the students who are actually paying attention in your class. But like I said, the opposite, the students who just use the cheating tools won't be able to walk you through the problems. So that's a kind of another way. in the chat, let's see, using alternates to symbols, words instead of symbols when teaching some formulas. Yeah, so if you use if you use words instead of symbols in your problems, but your students write down their work using symbols, you can kind of know whether they're using Chegg or some other site whenever they're writing their answers. And I know this past semester, I had a situation with logarithmic properties, and I had several students who were writing their answer in this extremely weird way in their work. And so I typed in I copied the answer that some people wrote, the format, and I put it in Google, kind of did a backwards search to see, who would write their answer this way. And then I found some solving tool website, and it worked them backwards and on how to do those.
One thing that I did this last year, I would give examples of, here's this problem, student A came up with this answer, student B came up with this answer. Determine which student has the correct answer. And then, so that's like just a Billy or Andy, one or the other. But then the continuation on that is who explained in your own words one possible way that the person who got it wrong, how they got it wrong. So it's something that they actually have to be able to communicate the process and, use more modality than just clicking a number on the computer. It was more work for me to go through and analyze and say, well, is this a possible justification or not? But I felt that the students that knew what they were doing, it was very obvious what the misstep was for the wrong student. And I felt that was a really good tool for me to use for my classes.
So do you just make that like a short answer question?
Yep.
Where you grade that manually?
Yep. We use the Canvas platform. And so, part one is who is wrong, and part two, what was the correct answer? Where did they goof up? And it didn't take too much to correct, but it was some time.
Angela, is this a good time to mention a couple things if I can share the screen?
Yeah, I was going to say, I think we've kind of hit some good topics. So Scott, if you want to go ahead and are you able to share your screen?
Let's see. I'm going to try. No, it's participant screen share.
Scott, I'll make you co-host now.
Okay, let's see.
Go ahead.
All right. So you are probably now seeing then something from Moodle, and I just want to use it to explain a couple of things I've done. I believe it was Taylor earlier who mentioned using random names in a story problem or something like that. And so my thing is the algorithmic generation of problems is great in MyLab Math or WebAssign or something like that for if I'm teaching, say, algebra or below or some basic concepts, and that's works well. I know with, for example, what you're seeing right here are a couple of questions from differential equations. I need to grade their work, and I don't want 30 different versions of the problem. I know you can have an algorithmic number generator, but then I'm if someone makes a mistake and I want to give partial credit, I've got to work through all the different numbers they've used. So I only have a couple of different versions of the problems, but what I've done to get around the use of Chegg and other things. So if a student posts something, like right now you see this 20 points in red. I put it in green, I put it in blue, I put it in different colors for different students. Like the Moodle picks a random version of the question. There are really only two versions of substance of this question that the students had, but then I have different colors for all these, and I just make a bunch of versions because it's easy to just copy them. And so if a student has, typically students will post more than one question to Chegg, and you can tell by the combination of, okay, they have a green 20 points for number 4 and a blue 20 points for number 5 and a red for number 6 or something. You can tell which student did it. You've at least narrowed it down to a couple of students, and then by looking at their actual work, you can tell which student did what. The other thing, a couple of other things. I want to see work that is based on what we've done typically. I know they can do problems another way correctly. I tell them, feel free to check it some other way, but you need to show me you did what, how we work through things. So I put this in there, and then this also makes it easy to search in Chegg, because as someone else mentioned, Chegg does not have a great search engine, but if you put things that are unique in there, you will find your problem when you go to search for it. So changing the color, using something unique, and this also, tells them what I expect. I do, to get around Symbolab and such, I do type my problems into Symbolab first. And so two things. One, Symbolab, as someone mentioned, does solve some problems in ways students never would. So I also, for example, in this case, Symbolab takes, or Wolfram Alpha, or they take Cinch and Cosh and they change them to their, e to the x and e to the negative x form when they give solutions. So we weren't doing that. So I gave this problem because I know Symbolab will give the answer in a way that I'm not asking for. And then in this problem, to get around the issue of I wanted the form of the solution, I just intentionally omitted terms from the original equation so that, it's still a very fair test question, but Symbolab isn't going to help them with it. Let's see, someone with Chegg, someone mentioned that they update their search engine around 4 a.m. in whatever time zone each day. They do, but they also, what I found helpful is that you can search by date there, and so you can, and it wasn't easy to find. Once I found it, I kept the link, and I can put it in the chat if you want. I need to actually go find the link myself, but I know I have it somewhere. You can bring up all the problems posted in the, in the calculus section or something for a particular day. And that doesn't help you when lots of schools are giving final exams at the same time. But on the, on the third Tuesday in the semester, I was able to find clumps of my questions, back to back to back. And that was very helpful. Also in Chegg, if you right click the screens that are posted, people upload images, and you can, if you download those, they are downloaded with the original file name. So many people upload images from their phone, like the tutors upload images from their phones and their date and time stamped, and that was helpful. So just some things that I wanted to mention. It was just easier to share the screen there. So I'll stop sharing it, but that was that.
Does anyone else randomize exam questions themselves? I know MyOpenMath and WAMAP has random, from a group of questions, right? They can kind of pull any one of those for a student.
Yeah, I do that. I will have a group of 10 or 15 similar questions. They're all a similar difficulty, and I will pull one. I'll have different groups, different pools in the test, and so everybody's getting a similar test but different questions altogether. Plus, each question's randomized algorithmically, so it's a pretty different test for everybody. All the same difficulty level though, but that takes a lot of time. That's the trade-off.
Absolutely, yeah.
Does anybody have any other tips or things that they do on actual exams to look up before we move on to how to possibly remove your questions from sites like Chegg?
So maybe I can just add, and sorry for joining lately, our grading just got finalized.
Oh, that's okay.
I'm using WebSign for homework, but when I'm doing tests, I go into codes and I'm I'm not really good with HTML, but just by comparing their examples in the editor, I add texts where I ask sub-questions, and I can do the same also in Pearson's MyMathLab. So for example, in Pearson, when they had an exam in differential equations, and it was a simple Laplace transform of a discontinuous function, I would ask additional questions like, based on the step function, can you write how does the function behave as a piecewise continuous? So break it down, give me the graph of a function. So these little questions that go around and sort of dig for understanding, for deeper understanding, so that we can see that they really know what they're working on. I think then when they're trying to look it up online, it's also harder. So you can, just using one question, you can build a story about it. So I was using something about, in Calc 3, about errors, estimating the maximum error, but I made a whole story like your grandmother has a plot in her backyard and it's a rectangle. And so it wasn't possible, to just look it up with an online solver. Plus the exams are supervised. I'm watching them through Zoom, through a secondary device from a side. So I really inflict all kinds of measures.
Great, thank you. It's a good tip.
So should we move on to, sorry, should we move on to the last piece here, and then we'll have time for more discussion after that?
That sounds good, thanks. Go ahead, Jeff.
Okay. So like Scott was saying, and we were mentioning earlier, once you get some questions up that your students have uploaded to Chegg, then they just stay there. And so that other students can, search for those questions that are unique to you and find them later, and then use the previous solution to help them. So in order to remove stuff from Chegg, there's a link here to the Chegg honor code. I can put that in the chat later, but you can just search for Chegg honor code. And what 95% of the students are doing on Chegg is violating the honor code, but they don't really care to do anything about it unless faculty report the post as being problematic. So what you need to do, at least this has worked for me, is find all the problems, or find the ones you can on Chegg that are yours, and save the URLs in a spreadsheet, and then you want to send it to them as a CSV file. And then you have to send a letter signed by your dean. I don't know why it has to be a dean, but that's their rules. And so what I did is I just made up a letter, the dean signed it, and then I just changed the date on it every time I send in another Chegg request. And then you email both of those things to honorcode@chegg.com, and then in a couple days or a week or however long, it used to be faster, now it's been slower, they will send you back. Well, first they'll remove those problems from Chegg, so they won't be on there anymore. Then they'll send you back a spreadsheet. It will have the question ID, the date and time it was posted, the date and time it was answered, the Chegg ID of the student who posted it, the name of the student who posted it, their email address, their IP address, their school name. Now, a year ago, I was finding that students would just use their real name and their school email address, which made it really easy to track them down if I didn't already suspect who they were. Then they got a little smarter and started using fake names and fake schools and fake, or some throwaway email address or something. But sometimes this information can be useful. They'll also, because they've taken down the problem and the solution from their website, they will send you some HTML code along with links to the images that were posted there, so you still have that to follow up, to investigate, and so forth. And then in a separate tab on the spreadsheet, they will send you a list of people who have viewed that solution, Chegg users who have viewed that solution. Now, they don't keep this data for very long, I don't think, because usually when I get it back, it's just people who viewed it recently, even if it's a problem that has been up there for a long time. But they'll give you the, again, if it's not fake, the name, the email address, Chegg ID, and school name of the people who have viewed that post. And it won't be, none of this is perfect, but it gives you a lot of information, especially if a student is claiming they have no idea what Chegg is and why are you, accusing me of cheating when their unique version of the problem got posted up there. And so I know from other folks at other colleges, they've had a real problem trying to do this, but for me, this process has worked. And if you go to that honor code page, there's a link there where you can upload some of the same information into an online form, but I didn't have as much luck with that. It was sending them the email that with this information that seems to work every time. So, and I'll just mention there are other sites that have problems up there. They're actually not as easy to get the stuff removed. I had to remove some stuff from Bartleby, but they won't give you any student information. They'll just eventually remove the stuff that you complain about. And then there's some other sites that don't even have any way of, on their site of communicating to them that they have stuff up there that's, you know, the result of some sort of academic integrity problem. So Angela, did you have stuff to add, or other folks have stuff to contribute about this?
So I'm sorry, the only way you can get the Chegg ID name is to go through the honor code process, or is there another way to see who posted it?
Well, okay, so if you pay Chegg, you know, $15 a month plus tax, let me go over here to Chegg. So here's the Chegg site. We'll go to, here's their expert Q&A, which, you know, they're supposed to ask just homework questions and everything. So here's some problem that somebody asked, and here's the solution. So now, if you don't have a Chegg account, or if you're not logged in, you'll only see the problem, and then it'll, you know, ask you to pay $15 to view the solution here. But if you do have access to this before you send away in a few days or weeks, get the information, if you right click on this image and click inspect, or you can hit F12 or do some other things, but click inspect, then over here, there'll be all this HTML and so forth. And then if you go Control F and search for Asker, then it will show the Asker ID of the person who posted that, and it will show the time that the person who solved the problem posted the solution. Now, this Asker ID doesn't do you a whole lot of good if, you know, it's just a single problem and you have no idea who this person is. But if you have 5 problems that were, and one of them was obviously posted by student A, and the other 4 problems have the same Asker ID, then if you can't even uniquely assign those problems to that student, you know they're probably the same person who posted it. Or if you've gotten information previously from Chegg and you know this student Asker ID is associated with a certain student, then you know they've been cheating again. Does that help answer your question there?
That's great. I teach primarily statistics courses with word problems.
Mm-hmm.
And my technique over the last year has been to leave the solutions up there. Because then it makes it pretty obvious when students have cheated, and then I can just, you know, catch them, because there's a lot of, like you said, the expert answers aren't always correct.
Right.
Some of them use notation that we never covered. Some of them use notation that students couldn't explain. So that's been kind of my thought, was to leave those up. And, you know, I hate feeling like I have to police my students, but
yeah, I'm most tempted to leave up the ones where the solutions are wrong. Let me see if I can find something here. So, oh yeah, I was feeling particularly mischievous one day, so I posted this problem to Chegg myself just to see if anybody would realize what was going on. So I made up a story problem for statistics about students posting answers to Chegg, and there being some sort of cheat score that that's normally distributed or something, and somebody actually solved it. So without apparently realizing how sarcastic I was being by by posting that problem. So I left that one up there just for fun.
Thank you.
Good. Other comments or questions here? Or
I think also I think Jeff, you mentioned sometimes if you, let's say you accidentally or on purpose spell something wrong in your problem.
Oh,
it's
yeah,
also
I did mention that to you.
pretty obvious if that shows up.
Yeah, I did mention it the other day. I haven't ever done this on purpose, but I sometimes, because when I'm coding the problem, some of the fields in the you know, the coding window don't have the spell check turned on, I will sometimes accidentally misspell something in the problem, which makes it way easier to find after the fact, because I'm the only one who's misspelled that word in a sentence that, you know, that might be a relatively common sentence for a calculus problem or something. So I don't know that I do that on purpose, because I don't want to, you know, confuse the students who are not cheating, but it's sort of a backdoor way of identifying your problems as well. other comments or?
Yes, I want to say something that all of this has been making me think. I'm fully online. I have been teaching online for the past 20 some years. And just recently, I've been thinking that we cannot change students. There are more and more sites that are coming up that students can post their questions and get help. But it seems that we have to change the way we ask the questions. So I was thinking to myself, how about if we at the AMATIC level around the nation, we come up with working groups. For instance, for different courses, we get together faculty, 4 or 5 together, say for college algebra, pre-calculus, we put our heads together and come up with some questions that cannot be posted to any site. Questions that are not Googleable, questions that they cannot post into any sites, because in some areas, it's not really a word problem, but you have to word it in such a way that they cannot post it to Wolfram Alpha or Mathway or whatever. So that is my question for all of you. So if anyone is interested, maybe we can organize different groups for different courses and put our heads together. I have been keeping, some files for different courses that I teach with some non-Googleable questions. So maybe we can all share our knowledge, create websites and post those questions. And those of us who can program, maybe we can make it into, a pool of questions, but it's just a matter of coming up with the questions. So what are your thoughts?
Yeah, on the one hand, it's great to come up with questions that aren't online, but then once you give them to students, they'll be online. But some of these are ones that will defeat at least the Symbol Lab and Photomath type sites until they get more sophisticated. But yeah, that's great. And all my questions that I code are in WAMAP, and although I've been keeping some of them private just because I don't want them out there too much so I have to keep taking them off of Chegg. I'm certainly welcome to share that, and we can share those through MyOpenMath as well, which is the national version of WAMAP. But even just to get some examples, like you were mentioning, in a certain, some place that we can access through AMATIC, just gives people the ideas of the type of problems they could write themselves even then, or adapt to sort of circumvent some of these things. I will mention that as far as Chegg goes, it was, when the pandemic started, it was right before our final exams for winter last year. And I didn't know this at the time, but in retrospect, going back and checking, there were a couple students in each class who were using Chegg, and I didn't catch them at the time. And then the spring quarter, when we were fully online, it was a couple more. And then it seemed to really explode over the summer. And a colleague of mine and I and some of our other colleagues discovered this towards the end of summer quarter, and there were a lot of unhappy students who got caught, they've been cheating the whole quarter or something. But so we really cracked down, and then we started really cracking down on this and catching the students using Chegg at the beginning of fall quarter, and it seemed to decline. And now by the last couple of quarters, we've had way lower percentages of students using Chegg to cheat. And I think it's just because the word got out that, oh, if you use this, they'll catch you. And I remember from an earlier AMATIC webinar that, or some webinar about cheating, that they've done studies, and students at least claim that it's not the penalty so much that prevents them from cheating, it's the certainty that they will be caught, which I guess makes sense, because if you're not going to get caught, who cares what the penalty is? But that, in my experience, that seemed to be the case, that if you can, even if you just catch a few students, the word will get out among them that they shouldn't be doing some of these things. So.
Yeah, Philip is saying that, Behnaz, can you give us an example? I'm keeping a little booklet for different courses that I teach, and these are mostly conceptual kind of questions that they really have to think. It's not the way that you can put it in there and the system will just go crazy, because there is no way it will understand the question. And those are multiple choice, give me the choice, but it's not the way that system will understand. So if any of you are interested in this venture, just shoot me an email. Maybe we can easily form those working groups, and maybe this can be an ongoing working group. You know, we can meet at conferences. We can even present the results and make it available to the entire community of math professors. Because yes, you're right. It's just a matter of me seeing what kind of questions Jeff makes or Angela makes. You know, it's just getting the idea. And that is what I want us to do for different courses. I have attended several webinars that they say that, okay, here it is, but it is for this course, but I'm teaching pre-calculus, I'm teaching calculus, how do I do it there? So it's just that by us putting our heads together, we can come up with that pool of questions.
That's a great idea. Dan, you've got your hand raised.
Yeah, one of the things, we're in the beginning stages of doing this, but I asked the dean, can she find money for us to have a department Chegg account? And sure enough, she did. So we're gonna try to get it as a whole apartment. And instead of working one by one, you know, use a lot of these suggestions Jeff has given us and do it department wide. It sure makes it a lot easier.
I'm going to stop sharing here, as somebody mentioned, and just to follow up on what you were saying there, Dan. If I can figure out how to stop sharing. Let's see. I think I stopped.
Yes.
Okay. So it would be great if you could have a department Chegg account you could all share, but it turns out that Chegg is way more worried about them or you cheating them than they are about students using their site to cheat. So what happens if you log in to the Chegg account on more than one computer? They will shut you down and accuse you of letting somebody else use your Chegg account and lock you out and put you in Chegg jail. So
that's good. I didn't know that. That's good to know.
Yeah. So what I've done, I have it, but others of my colleagues will send me problems, and then I'll look up the solutions and send them to them. And we keep a big Google spreadsheet that lists all these problems, so that, and then of course the students, when they cheat in my class, don't realize that I know they've cheated in somebody else's class the previous quarter because I have access to all this information. But yeah, you'll probably get in Chegg jail if you share your login there. But you can do that though for some of the other sites.
As long as it's not Facebook jail.
Yeah.
That is
yeah, and Scott
wonderful.
points out multiple browser windows will also work. Yeah, or multiple browsers. So.
That is awesome. Thank you so much, Jeff and Angela. We thoroughly enjoyed your insights and learned a lot. It's an eye-opener. Once I was, last year I was attending a conference that Course Hero put together. So they sent me the link and all that. So I was attending the conference and I was just browsing their site. And then lo and behold, I saw so many of my course material up there. I said, well, who has given you permission to upload my stuff? They said, well, these are what your students have uploaded. So you have to go through the process, just like how Jeff said. So I had to send out an email, go through the process so that they would take down all my course material. So yeah.
We have got some last minute questions. Deborah had a question in the chat. Does anyone put anything in your syllabus stating that you regularly view math cheater websites to give the students a heads up that you will be checking these things?
I post something on my online platform, a announcement one of the first days that goes through why they shouldn't cheat, and has a video that I think came from one of these earlier webinars and things. And at the bottom I put a PS and say, if you still think, if you're still thinking about cheating because you think it's easier than actually learning the material or whatever, just be aware I have a very special set of skills, and I don't go into that further, but, and quote Liam Neeson basically, and you don't want to be, deal with that. So, and some students find that amusing if they actually read the announcement, but I do give them a heads up that they shouldn't be doing this, and that I will catch them. And I think again it's more the word getting out among the students that this is happening than us telling them that we'll catch them, because they don't believe it when we tell them.
Kathleen, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, just a warning to everyone. Several of my really elaborate, long project questions are up on Chegg. So even if you make it explorational and conceptual, it can still go up on Chegg. be aware. It was a lovely, long problem with all these steps to explore. And the reason I knew they got the answer from Chegg is because their answer was very mathy. It had variables in it, and clearly not what the student would do after, would actually express after the exploration. So be forewarned.
Oh, thank you.
Does anybody have anything else they'd like to share for the group before we wrap up? Or
I've had some students that I've caught using solutions from Chegg argue that math can't be plagiarized. So that's an interesting take. After denying that they've been to Chegg, then the secondary argument is that math can't be plagiarized. So there, you know, an equation is an equation, despite the fact that they're very specific, you know, word problems with, you know, different kinds of solutions. So, like I said, you know, the idea of just leaving those questions up, it's such a terrible part of this, you know, outgrowth of the crisis, is that, you know, we're relying on all this online education, but now we have to, you know, police our students so much. But like I said, I think it's probably easiest just to leave the bad solutions up there and let them find them.
So I had an interesting situation. I was teaching math methods for elementary school teachers. And of course it was during the pandemic, and there was unique answers that were put out. So I asked my mentor teacher, I was like, how am I going to deal with this? You know, I'm disgusted that these pre-service elementary school teachers are cheating. You know, it flies in the face of everything that I consider holy, right? And she had a very interesting response. She said, well, let's think of this. How she would respond to the student is, I have questions on the authenticity of this question, and I just really want to know, have you mastered this concept? I don't believe you officially mastered the concept during the test time, but right now I would like to see if maybe you could prove to me that you've mastered this concept here. And so I went through and I did a whole bunch of Zoom meetings, face-to-face. I phone called a couple of my students, and it was interesting because 9 out of 10 of them, you know, I did cheat. I was so stressed. I was so scared. I didn't know what to do. But because I cheated, I went back and I learned all that material, and yes, I can do this. And most of them were able to prove to me that they did have the content knowledge. And so I did give them a deduction on their grade. But I was kind of thinking, in certain circumstances, cheating is cheating, yes. But as teachers, isn't our ultimate goal to verify, can they actually do this information on their own? Are we preparing them for their next class or for their next job situation? Yes, they cheated, but they eventually went back and they did learn the information. So, I mean, before talking to my mentor teacher, I was like, throw the book at them, fail, they're sorry butts. But then I was like, you know what, there's always a different scenario, right? I probably wouldn't be quite so lenient with my upper division math courses, but it was just a really unique circumstance, and it was kind of nice to have a secondary person give me an input. So there's my 2 cents for cheating.
Yes. It's an ongoing saga.
And there was a question in the chat about how are students actually penalized if they are caught cheating. I know some colleges, the first offense, you get a 0 on that exam and they're warned. And then the second time they get a 0 for the class and maybe a mark on their transcript. But the question, I guess, is also formed, and I actually don't know what our college does or if this happens or not. But if a student gets a mark on their record, if saying that they cheated, you have to submit it to the registrar's office. I know specifically at our college, but when they go to a four-year university, does that carry over? Do they see that whenever it carries the records over? I'm not sure. Scott shared in the chat what he at his college what they do.
I'll just jump in there, Angela. And I've had a couple students recently, when they're applying to transfer to a four-year school, they are shocked to find out that on some of these applications, there's a thing that says, have you ever been accused of cheating or academic dishonesty in one of your courses? And so either they have to answer that, honestly or not, I guess. And so and also to, this first started showing up on some grad school applications I saw, but now it's even when you're transferring to a four-year school. So, and I've put that in my information for students to let them know that, this could come back to haunt you when you're trying to transfer. And that seems to be more worrisome to them than the, the consequences at our college.
Wow, that's interesting. Very interesting.
I guess to wrap everything up, the last comment kind of also points home to this, that cheating not also happens on tests, but it happens on homework. So if a student cheats on homework, they're not getting they may not be getting that mastery learning concept of understanding. Then they go to the test, and so they can't do it on the test, so then they have to cheat again, and then it just continues on and on throughout the semester. And then let alone if they cheat in Calc 1, then they've got to cheat in Calc 2 if they make it there and move on. So sometimes with the homework, if you can it's not as easy to catch cheating necessarily on the homework, because you may not be seeing their work or how they work out the problems, but hopefully you can do sort of maybe projects or authentic assessments before your actual exams to be able to see the written out work or explanations from your students, to maybe put a halt on cheating so much on homework before they actually get to the exam and it becomes a big problem. But I think that we're out of time. I don't want to keep anybody over. I think we hit a lot of great topics, and we might bring something out of this and create, like Benhaz was mentioning, create groups of people maybe interested in gathering types of questions for different courses, for different course levels. So that way, if you're interested in looking at different topics, that way we can get an idea of different things we could maybe do from there.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Jeff and Angela. We really appreciate your time, your insights, and the information. The one other point I want to mention to you all, if there is any topic that you're interested in, just shoot me an email and we will organize this faculty meetup. I think it's great because we all share, it's a very friendly environment. It's not just the speaker there, so everyone shared their thoughts, their insights. So thank you so much for your time, for being here today. Until the next time, this meeting is recorded, and look for the recording. It is on the professional development page. You all make it a great day and a wonderful rest of the week. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Benhaz, are you going to post the chat as well?
I can, yes.
Could you please?